Daf Yomi Tractate by Metzia, page 96a, part 2, with the words Sha'ala lasos ba pachos bipruta. Another question: if one borrowed an item to perform work with it that is worth less than the value of one pruta, what is the halacha? Do we require only that he borrow an item of monetary worth, and that exists in this case, or perhaps any benefit derived that is worth less than one pruta is nothing? In other words, it is legally considered to be of no monetary worth, and he is therefore exempt. Another question: if one borrowed 2 cows to perform work with them, that will be worth the value of one pruta in total. What is the halacha when appraising the value of the benefit derived to see that it has monetary worth of one pruta? Do we say follow the borrower and lender? In other words, appraise how much the benefit the borrower received from the lender, and in this case there is benefit of the value of one pruta. Or perhaps we follow the cows, and in this case each one of the cows does not provide the borrower with monetary worth of one pruta. Another question. Wow, a lot of questions happening here. It's almost like I can see a teiku coming. Let's see. Is this going to result in a teiku? No, I don't think so. Wow. Okay, anyway. Another question. If one borrowed an item from 2 partners, and the services of one of those partners were also borrowed by him, what is the halacha? Does the exemption of borrowing an item together with its owner apply in this case? For the exemption to apply, do we require all the item's owners to be working for the borrower, and that does not exist in this case? Or perhaps there is no such condition, but in any event, the borrower should at least be exempt from liability for that half of the item owned by the partner who is working for him. Another question: in the case of partners who borrowed an item and its owner's services were also borrowed by one of them, what is the halacha? For the exemption to apply, do we require that the owner be working for all the borrowers, and that does not exist in this case? Or perhaps there is no such condition, but in any event, the partner who borrowed only the item should at least be exempt from liability for the half of the animal that the partner whom the owner works for had borrowed. Another question: if one borrowed an item from a woman and the services of her husband were also borrowed by him, or where a woman borrowed an item and its owners borrowed an item, and the item's owners, its owner's services were also borrowed by her husband, what is the halacha? A husband has the right to use his wife's property. These questions are dependent on whether ownership of the right to use an item and the profits is tantamount to ownership of the item itself or not. Ravina said to Rav Ashi, in the case of one who says to his agent, go and lend your services to somebody on my behalf, together with lending my cow to that person, was the halacha? For the exemption to apply, do I require that the cow's actual owner work for the borrower? And in this case, that does not exist. Or perhaps, since the legal status of a person's agent is like that of himself, it is sufficient if his agent works for the borrower, and accordingly the necessary conditions exist. Ravaka, son of Ravaya, says Rav Ashi, this question, I wonder if this is the same Ravaya as earlier. This question concerning a husband is subject to dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. And the question concerning an agent is subject to a dispute between Rabbi Yonatan and Rabbi Yehoshua. The Gemara says the question concerning the husband and dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish pertaining to the requirement to bring the first fruits of one's fields to the temple and recite the accompanying declarations. In Deuteronomy chapter 26, as it was stated with regard to one who sells his field to another, not outright, but for its produce. Rabbi Yochanan says the buyer brings the fruits and recites the declaration, whereas Reish Lakish says the buyer brings the first fruits but does not recite the declaration. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Mevi V'Koreh. Like Mark explains, they disagree about whether it is justifiable for the buyer to recite the declaration, since that the declaration refers to is land which you, Lord, has given to me. Deuteronomy 26:10. In other words, he states that the land belongs to him. Rabbi Yochanan says that the buyer brings the fruits and then recites the declaration because he holds that ownership of the right to use the land and he may consequently ownership of the right of the use of land and its produce is tantamount to ownership of the land itself. Accordingly, the buyer is considered to be the owner of the land, and he may consequently recite the declaration. Reish Lakish says that the buyer brings the first fruits but does not recite the declaration because he holds that ownership of the right to use land and produce is not tantamount to ownership of the land itself. Accordingly, the buyer is not considered to be the owner of this land. The land is consequently unable to recite the declaration. Okay. The Gemara clarifies the second disagreement. The question concerning an agent is subject to a dispute between Rabbi Yonatan and Rabbi Yehoshua, as it is taught in a brisa. There is one who says, a steward appointed me to take care of his household and all vows that my wife will vow from now until I come back from such and such a place. You should nullify them for her in my stead. And the steward annulled them for her. One might have thought that they would have been nullified. To dispel this notion, the verse states with regard to a vow taken by a wife, her husband sustains her and let her husband nullify it. And her husband nullifies it. The husband sustains it and her husband nullifies it. Numbers 30:14, which indicates that only by her husband is able to do so, and no one else. This is the statement Rabbi Yehoshua. Rabbi Yochanan says we have found elsewhere since this, the statement of Rabbi Yochanan says we have found everywhere in halacha that the legal status of a person's agent is like that of himself. Since the steward was a great agent of the husband, his nullification of the vows is effective. El Rav Elish, the Rava, Amar Alei Rav Elish, the Rava, Rav Elish is the Rava. In the case of one who says to his Canaanite slave, "Go and lend your services to another together with lending my cow to that person was halacha, let the lemma be raised according to the one who says that the legal status of a person's agent is like that of himself, and let the lemma be raised according to the one who says that the legal status of a person's agent is not like that of himself." Okay, the Gemara elaborates, let the lemma be raised according to the one who says that the legal status of a person's agent is like that of himself as follows. Does this matter apply only to an agent who is obligated in his vote, just like the one who appointed him but not a slave, who is not fully obligated in mitzvot? the principle does not apply. Or perhaps even according to the one who says that the legal status of a person's agent is not like that himself, and maybe that matter applies to an agent who is a free, independent person. But in the case of a slave, since he has no independence on his master, as a possession of a slave is like the possession of his master. Anything that the slave acquires is automatically acquired to his master. Perhaps if the slave's services are borrowed, it will be the same one. Amar le Mustavra Yad Eved Yad Rabo Damya. Rava said to Rav Elish, it stands to reason that you are the possession of a slave. It's like the poison of his master. Then Rava says to Rav Elish, it stands to reason that since they're the possession of slaves. Rava said to Rav Elish, it stands to reason that since the possession of a slave is like that, like the possession of his master, then one knows who both another's alien item and the services of his slave is exempt from liability. But Rabbi Rachama raises the dilemma: what is the level of liability, and does the husband bear with regard to his wife's usufruct property? This is property belonging to the wife, and the husband, 70, has the right to use goals. Right to use and enjoy its profits, while they're married, but going much deeper than that, as we turn her upon termination of her marriage. Okay, wow.